Good day everybody, we finally made it to Chroma, but just note, I will tend to use rework, revamp, and tweak interchangeably as they're all various degrees of change, where tweak could be considered a minor rework for example, but let's not make this video drag on any more than it needs to. Okay, look, I get one, okay? Chroma is essentially half of a frame in its current state, but the half that works has been so glorified by things like eidolons and disruptors that some players seem content where Chroma is now. I know many wanted at least a few tweaks when Chroma Prime was slated for release, but I'm pretty sure all those voices kind of died out when nothing came of it. In terms of his base stats, I'd like to see Chroma not get eaten alive trying to stack his buffs, but I suppose if that's a necessary trade-off, it's not the end of the world. It's just painful to see some frames unkillable at the press of a button while frames like Chroma have to ramp up and they're still decently vulnerable. Chroma's passive does not even fit the definition in this current state, since it only takes place in the arsenal and requires an ability to be active to take effect. Stop. His passive seems like it was an easy compromise during the passive revamp. As the passive is now, it only forces players to make a choice of efficiency rather than having an adaptive elemental playstyle that seems to be at the core of Chroma. I feel elemental wards bonuses should be Chroma's passive. They could scale based on credits collected with a percentage increase in credit drops. I find this would make the passive both unique and effective, but there are some slight tweaks to each of the elements that could help even out their viability. Heat could use a higher base status chance, as the aim of this should not hinge on the damage it's dealing, because it's ultimately not that much, not to mention, it has fall off for some reason. Electricity, look, damage reflection just needs to be looked at as a mechanic, like as a whole. I'm under the impression that its damage is reduced by armor twice. Once when the enemy attacks a player, and again when the damage is being reflected. It's just nonsensical that it still exists like this. Damage reflection should either be changed to deal true damage, like a slash proc, debuff to make the enemy vulnerable to damage, like weaken them, or deal a percentage of HP in almost every instance. Like, new players look at 1000% reflected damage and they're like, oh my, but look, it's one damage. It's really just one damage. You put any, it's a damage, okay? Not to mention, if electricity is not gonna have continuous area damage over time like heat, then the reflected damage should always arc to nearby enemies. Equally, Chroma and effective allies should release electric procs periodically, along with a massive shock with brief invulnerability when the shields break. Look, shield gating should just exist, but since it's not, I just want to explicitly state the vulnerability. From there, shields could be restored based on the damage done by shock procs, but it's not essential. It could just aid in the overall sustainability of a shield build, right? For Toxin to me just feels like it lacks some sort of survivability, and I want to say Lifesteal would work here better over just regeneration. For Cold, slowing nearby enemies and making reflected bullets make enemies vulnerable to damage, just these type of debuffs easily just counter the amount of damage reflected bullets deal. For Chroma's first ability, Spectral Scream is a perfect example about what I dislike about many Warframe abilities, in that it currently detaches the player from core gameplay of mobility and shooting for an insufficient trade-off. Players are better off using a modded weapon like the Ignis that can apply multiple status effects and elemental procs at a greater range. Minimally, I believe fixing the scaling and allowing players to shoot while this ability is active would do it justice. I'm just not sure it'd be that satisfying. There's probably room to alternate the breath to blast like the Afterburn augment and give Chroma flight similar to Hildren, but I truly just find that mechanic clunky in practice. That's just me personally. You may feel differently, but I can't suggest it if I just don't like it. So instead, I believe Effigy should become Chroma's first ability. Tap to have it follow above Chroma and attack nearby enemies with breath attacks. Hold to force it to a location, dealing damage as it travels, and stunning upon reaching the location as per guided Effigy. Effigy would also apply the effect of Vex Armor and Elemental Ward bonuses and debuffs to allies and enemies in range respectively. While this ability is active, Chroma, if in range, should in-glide as if under the effect of Tractor Beam. I think this could give those diehard, Chroma needs to fly, get Red Bull and wings. It gives them enough to sate their desires of like having that flight feel without disrupting the core gameplay. The possible augments I have in mind would be Guarding Effigy, where Effigy would redirect damage taken by Chroma and his allies in range, Cleansing Effigy, which would allow Effigy to reduce or nullify status durations for allies in range, An Everlasting Ward, which would just work as per the current Everlasting Ward. Allies would keep the ward's buff for a duration after leaving the range of Chroma or Effigy. For Chroma's new second ability, 4 Seasons, it should cycle through the 4 based elements with a roar that briefly staggers enemies in range. Effigy will also stagger enemies in range. If Chroma is within Effigy's range, the roar range is instead doubled. We're just gonna small clap because this has got to be one of the most Chroma suggestions, like one of the more suggested Chroma changes to date. Anyone who has played him has probably felt the need for this change. There's just no way. For the augment, however, elemental commixture, I would instead prefer that the 4 base elements be instead cycled for combined elements at slightly reduced effectiveness. So, you know, gas, corrosive, viral, magnetic, radiation, and blast. Ultimately, this would allow Chroma to have 2 simultaneous buffs and effects, which should make for more interesting gameplay. Like, more variety is what we aim for, no? But it also be effective. For Chroma's third ability, Vex Armor, it is literally what has made him bearable this long. And I don't feel like a change is necessary, but personally, I feel like a taunt while active, at minimum, would do Chroma and his teammates justice. Lastly, I'd argue for, instead of the current additive bonus, a smaller multiplicative bonus that results in the same overall power, for more cooperative avenues like combining with other buffs, or allowing teammates to get maximum power even if they have other additive bonus like Serration. Like there's no way your teammate's not gonna mod for Serration if you're in a random group, you know? For Chroma's augment, Vexing Retaliation, look, I hate this augment. It's a prime example that seems to be in the right ballpark, but it's just implemented poorly. Like, it just doesn't seem worth the slot to me, nor does it seem to augment Vex Armor in a truly meaningful way. Personally, I'd like to see this augment do something like multiplying the energy cost to increase the capacity of Vex Armor and allow Chroma to start at 50% value, but only lasting 1 shot, you see? Augmenting Vex Armor from DPS to burst. Another possibility is for this augment to instead grant percent HP damage reflection for those under the effect of Vex Armor. However, it would likely require cold and electricity to lose their damage reflection to make this augment equally effective regardless of the element players use. For Chroma's fourth ability, I'm just going to call it Dragon Surge, is where ideally for many Chroma fans, I believe we'd like to see a transformation of sorts. But look, I'm going to have to break some hearts here. I highly doubt we're going to see full-on Dragon form at any point in Warframe. More likely, we're to see something like an elemental surge similar to Gauss that envelops Chroma in a selected element and augments his elemental ward to add elemental damage to him and his allies' weapons. But there's also the possibility for its augment to change it to something like an elemental storm, or even a quick cycle of a storm in every element for 1 cast. But at that rate, it might just ease implementation to allot Chroma the fourth abilities from the frames that make him up. So like Saren's Miasma, dealing toxin damage and not corrosive, you heathens. Volt's Discharge, Ember's Inferno, and Frost Avalanche. So players could cast Chroma's ult in each element to get the respective abilities, or single cast to cause them all to occur at once or simultaneously. Either way, it could have a low fixed range as to not infringe on each of the individual frames' mastery of their ability. Okay, I just heard myself say that, but maybe that augment is too wild, but it also makes sense. Like, it seriously just makes sense. Even if it's a stretch, because they all scale off range. Okay, no more. Even if it's a stretch, at the very least, it might inspire something, okay? Overall, I feel the changes I've suggested would give Chroma a more concrete role with increasing flexible avenues, you know? Even if you don't agree with my approach or direction, Saren mains, please do not send me death threats over that augment. Hopefully there's something here to forge a discussion about Chroma's improvement. I mean, seriously, thank you guys for taking the time to watch this video. Just let me know in the comments how you feel about Chroma now, the suggestions I made, or if you have any of your own. How does it feel to one-shot an item? Okay, look, I'm done. Thank you all very much. You have a great rest of your day.